Fantastic. Well, we did finally make it, and it is recording, so
We
we're
did.
here.
Before we
Thank
get
you.
into it,
Go ahead.
not to cut you off before we get into it, but look what came in the mail today.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for purchasing.
congratulations on your second release. Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure. It's the least I could do.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and congratulations to you for this one. Which we're
Yeah,
gonna get into,
thank you.
and of course, thank you for being patient, is what I was gonna say for dealing with just a million hoops we had to jump through to get this started. But so let's talk about this one because yeah, I love this. I knew I had to like talk to you after reading this because I don't read much sci-fi to begin with or fantasy too much, but when I do, um it's hard for me to get into that kind of stuff. But I think what you do, blending kind of the genres or at least the skill sets of being a thriller writer with kind of what you see in isolated space thrillers, where say sci-fi's, whatever you want to call it, like that, it really worked to sink its teeth into me, and I really enjoyed this. But I wanted to hear from you, kind of your experience with making that switch from the thriller world, the modern mercenary series and everything, to something so different, right? How was that?
Yeah, so it's funny because it was a switch, but then it sort of became them growing up together
Mhm.
because the I got the very first idea to write Occupant in December of 2016, the day that the first Alien Covenant trailer dropped.
Okay.
And I remember seeing that because I grew up, I absolutely loved Alien and The Thing, if that's not apparent by having read that. Um, and so I was like, you know what? Because I'm starting to really get my stride in this writing thing. I'd already been through a couple of iterations of the first drafts for the Modern Merc series and all that, and a couple of other projects. I was like, you know what? Let me just get into it and see if I can write a sci-fi horror like the ones that I love.
Yeah.
Not none of this modern day, and it's thankfully it's a little harder to do in writing of modern day horror, which is nothing but gratuitous gore and unearned jump scares. But more of that, like, okay, what do I love about it? Well, I love the fact that it's almost less of a sense of horror and more of a sense of persistent dread of there's something on the back of your neck, and
Yeah.
you want there to be a jump scare so you can at least get some kind of release, but there isn't. So to pull myself back from that rabbit hole a little bit. So it would very much become a cycle of I would do a revision of Deception, I would do a revision of Wetwork, and they've had totally different names at that point. And then I would do a revision of what was at the time called I think it was called Ocean of Emptiness was the working title for the longest
Yeah.
time until I was like, this is too wordy and it's too ambiguous. I need something that's punchy, much like Alien and the Thing, and I settled on Occupant.
Great title.
And thank you very much. And so it was to make that shift was interesting because it went from being really forced to be grounded in the way of thrillers where you can take some liberties, but for the most part, it has to be able to take place in the world that we live in. The
Yeah.
physics, the laws, X, Y, and Z, unless you're writing like something that's a little more almost fantastical or like a John Wick where it's implicit that, okay, yeah, everyone's dancing while this gunfight is going on because
Right.
they're technically NPCs in a video game.
Yeah.
So taking that and then getting to sort of peel back the realism a little bit with, okay, we're 200 years in the future. I still want to keep it grounded, but not to the point where, you know, you could have Neil deGrasse Tyson narrating it and it would make sense.
Hmm.
But I wanted to do it where I could still have it fun. So a lot of it was sort of like the rule of cool while also keeping it somewhat realistic.
Right.
So and then just having a little bit of fun with it too. So that shift that made the shift pretty easy because I wasn't as constrained as I was writing, stuff for Deception and Wetwork and All
Yeah.
In, where it was okay, this is in a world that is pretty much our own. An Occupant and some of the follow-on projects that take place in the same universe that may or may not already be in the process of being written or have already written and now being revised. Uh, it allowed me a little more freedom, and that
Mhm.
made it basically made it to where okay, I've got my serious project on the side now. I can have a little bit of fun with the sci-fi stuff
Yeah.
to make a short story long.
I like that. And I think what you do well, and like I said, I haven't read a whole lot of sci-fi, but one thing I think you do well in particular that I haven't seen a whole lot of authors do is you still like it does take place in this world, and there will be like a watch relic that's been passed down generation to generation. You'll hear stuff from our time period. So there's that link of realism where I feel like a lot of sci-fi, and I guess in the movies too, it's just like we're in the future. So it's like this totally different world. There is no technology or like products that were even similar or music. And we kind of just like jump into this new world. And I think you did a great job of grounding it still in our world.
Oh, thank you. And I attribute that to Alien 100%
Okay.
because Alien and I would say the first three Star Wars films, the original Star Wars films, where they
Mhm.
very much had that used future feel to it of
Yeah.
and even Alien Isolation, the video game that came out, they built that on the basis of Alien, where there were no props that were just completely fabricated. Everything that was in the game and in the movie, they had to make. So, okay, how is it going to be? How is it going to be realistic? And that sort of used future of everything is tangible, everything that was on set, we could make with the stuff that we have today. And they did that back in the 70s. And so, with that, it made sense to you know, the guy with the watch,
Yeah.
or the fact that they're still using just their versions of modernized M4s and HKG 36s and things like that. Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right. Yeah. These things do like continue on. They're either passed down or we improve on them, but they're not going to totally like there wouldn't be some huge shift every time and that it looks like some futuristic weapon we've never seen the basis of. So I enjoyed that aspect
Well,
myself.
that I could never effectively write like laser weapons and all that because I'm so dumb when it comes to actual science.
Right.
Like when I first released this, my father called me. He's like, "Why is there a new book out? Like, isn't this supposed to be in October?" And I was like, "Yeah, there was a technical issue, so I pushed it up." He goes, "So it's a sci-fi?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "How did you handle physics?" Because I'm just dumb when it comes to I never made it past chemistry. I skipped my
I'm the same
chemistry
way.
final in high school. So for a lot of that stuff, I either did really, really intensive research that probably ended me up on yet another set of watch lists that my research usually does, or I just hand waved it. How do
Yeah.
they travel fast in the light? I'm gonna write this from the cook's perspective, so that way, because he doesn't need to know that.
Right.
You
Right. Good point. I think that brings me into a question I wanted to ask. You know, when you look at the Modern Mercenary series in particular and what people say about you, like they love the realism, the attention to like detail and all like the research and real world experience that comes together to make those so grounded. So how did you balance that? And I guess you answered it a little bit, but was there a challenge for balancing realism and sci-fi, like two worlds that are kind of different and yin and yang?
there was a challenge in that, once you get into the realm of sci-fi, and especially, I wouldn't say this is completely hard sci-fi where everything is 100% realistic, but I wanted to lean more on the realistic side of things. My problem in the balance and running into that is writing things that I don't know,
Mhm.
being science, the math that inherently goes into the science. Uh, so, so for that balance, like I said, there was a lot of hand waving and very much sort of playing on the fact that I don't know and kind of putting those tongue in cheek things, and then just going down the rabbit holes for the incinerator, researching metals that have a very high melting point, but also don't conduct heat. And then what metals I can layer with that, and alloys and things like that, or how, what's the average distance between a star and how many exponents, and then making a joke about that and like the
Right.
main street signs. So just a lot of rabbit holes, and then just some things that I completely just pulled out of thin air, like the whole chickens not being able to lay eggs in
Oh
space
yes,
thing.
yes.
I have no idea if that's true or not. I thought
It
it was
works.
funny.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
works.
Because it's just like, okay, what's a modern inconvenience that would absolutely make,
Mhm.
this line of work be kind of hellish? Oh, we can't have real eggs. Why? Chickens, they just don't like space. I don't know.
Right. Right. And hey, that's one thing people can't disprove yet. So that and that I mean that's the one thing where like you would have to do all this research and people who don't write sometimes will ask me about like, oh, why do you have to research for a book? Like, aren't you making it up? But like those people who read and find one inconsistency, like love to tell you about it. Or like if there's a
Oh
flaw in
yeah.
science, they love to point that out. So yeah, you got to do your due diligence for sure.
Oh, and I have someone built in, like I said, my dad. So when Deception came out, in the first third of the book, I think it was right after their first job. The character Alex, he meets with his wife at I think it was either a Chinese or Japanese restaurant. I don't remember. But regardless, I said that I think one of the characters ordered miso soup. This SOB, and I love my father, went and looked up the restaurant and pulled up their menu and was like, they don't serve
Oh
miso
yeah,
soup here. It's
there you
like,
go.
come on.
Of course, you always
I mean,
get
if there's one
that.
person I want to find, it's you. But like, really, this is the level that we're getting into.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And the bigger you get, the more it happens. I'm sure like yeah, emails just flood the big names we know daily of like, well, actually, this the site you used here isn't actually like that. But hey, still fun, and I think you pulled it off with the balance. That's something I particularly enjoyed about it because I think maybe that's why I don't read a whole lot of sci-fi. Is sometimes I get lost in the world they've built, and I don't feel that connection. I think you keep like our heart of the real world here pretty well. So
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, keeping a layman science approach.
I
That's what
need
I'll
it.
call it.
Yeah, I'm a D student when it comes to science, so I needed that. So um I wanted to talk about the pacing too, because you come from the thriller world, and people typically think of thrillers as like these page turners are fast, like you got to get the plot out as fast as humanly possible. And what I appreciated about this book, that I think the best science fiction films that I watch, because I don't do a whole lot of reading of it, like I said, but like Thing and even Alien One, like those things are deliberate with their pacing, and same with Occupant. Like I wanted you to speak a little bit to that pacing of being deliberate, being more as you said, like atmospheric more than just jump scare. And I think you put it really well when you said there, like you even want that release. I wanted like give me like something, but there's just enough like anxiety that's strangling you the whole time, and you're just like, can I breathe, like what is happening? And then you're turning the pages for a different reason, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So for the pacing, I'm going to steal the word that you just used, and it was very deliberate in the fact that because when I set out to make this, I was like, okay, what are the ones that I love? And Aliens, The Thing. Later on, Event Horizon, but I hadn't seen that at the time of writing this the first time. And what I was thinking about it, and what's the main thing that those three/four, to a lesser extent, with Event Horizon, it's a little more fast paced because it was a '90s movie. What do they have in common? Well, the pacing, because the first third to almost the first half of those movies, basically nothing happens. And it's all world and character building with little breadcrumbs of intrigue. We're not, yeah, we're going and we're watching these guys do their daily tasks and all that. But then there's a few things that are weird that happen. In Alien, they get the transmission, they set down, and their landing strut gets all messed up, and they've got to put out the fires and deal with the electrical issues. And The Thing, it's the appearance of the Norwegians, the dog, the hey, what were these guys doing? We got to go check it out. So it's those little bits of intrigue that are scattered out to really keep you engaged while also basically getting you endeared with the characters and embroiled in the world. And that's what I set out to do. But then, much like those movies and what I tried to do with Occupants, once you hit that inciting incident, it's pretty much breakneck from there on. You're going and going and going with just those little itty bitty breather moments in between.
Right.
Okay, yeah, they can take it easy. They're safe, but are they? I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. So it's still
Right.
right in the back of your mind of whether or not you actually need to know. And then you're like, well, there's still 100 pages left, so something's either it's a really long, wind down, or something else is
Yeah.
going to happen. Just like when you pause a horror movie, and you're like, oh, there's 45 minutes left, and I thought they just killed the thing. Like, what's going on?
Right. Yeah, and it's a good point towards the end, like you said, once it hits that fuse and you go, but you do a good job as a writer of not like letting the beats kind of step on each other's toes. And that's something that I worry about for myself. Like you see, I write short novels, and like I'm always afraid, am I giving these story beats enough time to breathe? And I think that's something that does still happen with Occupantus. Once it still goes, you still have enough of a break where you're thinking, the anxiety, and you're not getting just swept up in the action, and kind of forgetting those endearing moments and those great elements of the first half of the novel. So yeah, again, kudos there. You mentioned characters, so let's talk about characters. I think that you do a great job of balancing. There's a lot of characters in this, right? I mean, you do a good job of having a decent amount
There's
of cast.
I think there's 13 on the main crew, and then a couple of extras that come on later.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head.
Yeah, for me, like that is a huge cast. I work with really small numbers of people, so like, tell me a little bit about writing that many characters and your kind of approach to writing characters because they're all very distinct. They're of course like big standouts that might be people's favorites and things like that, but you do a really good job of having everybody be a voice and like their own voice. So I wanted to hear your approach to character development and kind of your philosophy on that whole thing.
Yeah, so with these characters in particular, and with most of the characters that I write, everyone is damn near everyone is based on a real person. I
Okay,
think in this one, the only ones that weren't based on real people were Eric and Roland.
my favorite.
I think so. It was Roland your favorite.
It's just like it's just that I found him such a fun
which
character.
which I'm very happy to hear because he's much like another character in the Modern Mercenary series, which I didn't expect. He's becoming a fan favorite.
Yeah, he's
Um,
just so fun.
and Roland was literally like, okay, he needs to be an android, but with a personality.
Hmm.
And I was really I wrote most of this after I'd seen Alien Covenant, which came out in May of 2017. So my main basis was Michael Fassbender's character in that.
Hmm.
But I was like, I don't want him to be a carbon copy of that, so I'm going to give him his own little personality things too. All the rest of the characters that were based on real people. Ricky and Dominic were based on. Oh, sorry, and Carter. I mean, Carter was basically my kind of self-insert to a
Hmm.
point, but Carter's also infinitely more cool and badass than I'll ever be. But I
There you
was
go.
like, he's a main character. I know how a main character would think, so I'm going to put him in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ricky and Dominic were based on guys that I worked in the hospital with years ago. Um, Sam, AC, Cameron. God, it's terrible that I'm forgetting the names of my own characters. Basically, the rest of the crew were all based on guys that I used to be in a Slack/Discord with
Hmm.
because of a podcast that I've been on a guest on a couple of years ago that is dead and gone, and no one needs to look into that. But um, it was all based on them and their personalities that I was able to garner between just the talks on the Slack and our Discord calls when we play video games together and all that. And I was like, well, you know what? I need to cast the characters for this project. I'm friends with all these guys. I'll just base it off of them. And so I took that, and then of course, what you do with all characters is you take that sort of basis, or what I do with all characters. Sorry, is I took that basis, but then I tweak it. Add a thing here, take a thing away
Hmm.
there, make friendships where there may actually be some tension between
Right.
people in real life, or vice versa. And that and then it just sort of reverted back to the alien and thing approach of hey kitty
Yes.
cat of yeah the one in the house is she's sequestered right now because she's very noisy. She likes to scream. And so it was taking that approach from Alien thing where yes, you've got a small cast of characters, but each character is very. I wanted it to be almost like the personality version of how in like cartoons, each main character is supposed to have a distinct silhouette. I
Oh,
wanted it
okay.
to be that, but with their personalities.
I like
And
that.
yeah, there's some overlapping. You've got a couple that are more chill, but to varying degrees. You've got others that are high strung. You've got some that are completely ambivalent and are just there for the money.
Yeah.
And then you got ones that are pissed off that the people who are there for the money are getting more money, even though they're not doing any work. So I wanted to balance that with also the okay, what do these guys do? They're space truckers. Again, pulling straight from Alien. And what yeah, this thing is basically a love letter to Alien is the
Right.
best way to describe it. So I wanted that sort of, yeah, we're here doing this, but most of us are sort of laid back because our job really isn't that high impact unless you're one of the engineers or you're the captain because everything falls on you in some form or fashion. The rest are just sort of like, the systems are running, we can do
Right.
our own thing. So that allowed for a lot of latitude in developing the characters and focusing on character interactions and allowing those to evolve as the book went on. When things are good, people are chummy. When things are bad, some people are like, okay, I'm going to hide behind this guy because he knows what he's doing. Or no, things are bad and I'm tired of hearing you bark at you because you're an asshole and blah 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 blah. So so it really allowed me to get creative with that and sort of play on the psychology of the situation that it was in and how it would affect all those different personality types
Yeah.
within this. I think I just rambled for like 10 minutes. I apologize
No,
if
that
that didn't
was
answer your question at
no, it was
all.
good. It definitely did, and I think that's what makes the first half like engaging and to keep readers there when they're like, oh, where's the threat or like the action. It's coming in that conflict between the personalities, as you're saying, and I found that interesting too. That the different motivations for the people being up there on the ship, I found that to be lending itself to a lot of good conversations and a lot of good tension. So yeah, I like that, and I love what you said about the silhouettes. Like I hadn't heard that about the cartoons, but that's a great way to think of it, and I think you pulled it off. So that's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that answer. That was good. But how about this one? What is your hopes for somebody who gets this book, picks it up, reads it? What do you hope they get out of this? What do you want them to take away from their time with Occupant?
I would say the biggest thing I'd want someone to take away from their time with the occupant is to, if they already had it and maybe it died down a little bit, find a reigniting of the appreciation for slower paced things. Or if, say, they're a younger reader, if they weren't exposed to a lot of the classics like we were, and a lot of people who've enjoyed Occupant so far have, is to find that love of that slow burn, atmospheric, almost earned horror. Where you're in it for the long haul, but who boy does it pay off at the end. Um, and then so that's I'm gonna say that's my philosophical answer, and then for the actual content answer, just some escapism. That's the
Yeah,
biggest, that's the main reason I write, is
yeah,
for the escapism and to give people a way to escape the mundane of their everyday lives and to go to places and see things, you know maybe even unimaginable horrors, but that would never happen in real life,
yeah.
and to allow them to get away from it for a little bit. So I'd say those are the two big takeaways that I would hope someone picking up the book would get.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. And I'm with you. Hopefully, the slow burn kind of makes a comeback because I'm a big fan of short chapters and everything, and I write short chapters, and I like that. Louis L'Amour is one of my favorites, but there is something about like the earned horror or like the earned storytelling where things are more deliberate in their pacing that seems to be less like fewer and far between. If it wasn't for you, an Occupant this year, I don't think I've read a deliberately paced novel like that, or even watched too many movies that had that pacing. So that kind of storytelling is fallen to the wayside because of the attention spans, probably. But it's kind of a sad thing, and I appreciate you pulling this out and giving somebody a
Now,
good example of it.
now that being said, and I know we've talked about it a little bit offline, I am all for the very like punchy, pulpy,
Mhm.
short chapters. Bam, 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 bam. I've got half a shelf on the bookshelf here of old Phoenix Force and Able Troop pulps,
Yes, that's
and
awesome.
and it's very and those what's it what did you call them, men's action
Men's
stories or something like that?
men's adventure fiction, is that the one? Men's adventure
That's what it
fiction.
is, men's adventure fiction. Yeah, beach reads, as another friend of mine who grew up when those things were in their heyday.
Mhm.
Romance novels for men. I
Yes.
love those things, and I think they have their place, because even those are still deliberately paced, but they're just
Mhm.
much faster. But you still need a bit of an attention span. So there's definitely a spectrum on these things, and I think that you definitely nailed it with Frozen Wrath, and I'm really excited to see what you do with Retaliation Mountain. You're next on my ever growing to be read list.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Um, So I have two questions from Jake Widmer. If you know him, he's another independent author from my
Of
area. And
course, I know
so,
Jake.
yes. So he wanted me to ask, have you ever received any backlash when writing any of your novels, like Modern Mercenary series or anything, and how you dealt with that if you did?
Backlash, as in like a bad review, or someone reached out and was like, "You're a terrible person for writing this."
I guess whatever story comes to mind for you, whatever backlash that you think you've had with it, if any.
So the only backlash I've had, kind of review wise, is there's someone who I think left like a 2-star review for Deception on Amazon, but they didn't leave like an actual review. They just left the rating. which kind of
Right.
irritates me even more.
Yeah.
Like I'll take a bad rating, but leave me a review as to why you didn't like it.
Right.
At least
Give me
then,
some
you
context
know,
there.
yeah, be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, or oh, you're just an idiot.
Hmm.
Um, because and I did have one, I think it was a one-star review on Audible for Deception, where they were like, "Oh, it's what a bunch of nonsense. I've never heard so many words strung together that mean nothing. It's just characters reminiscing and talking, and reminiscing and talking." It's like, and he goes, "I quit 2 hours before it was done." It was like, well, first off, you quit before the climax, like right as it was going to start,
Yeah.
and also talking and reminiscing and talking and reminiscing. Have you read a book before? That's
Right.
what 90% of books are.
How are
But
you
then
supposed
I
to get to
went,
know the
I
characters, I guess?
exactly, just because it was literally the first, like, bad review of that, and it was also, like, the day before my birthday, I think, so I was like, "Oh,
Uh,
the
stink.
audacity!" And so I
That's
went
so
in,
funny.
because on Audible, you could see what other reviews they read. I was like, "Oh, this person, that explains everything I need to know. I don't need to." Yeah, this isn't even on my register anymore, or registering on my radar anymore.
Right.
On the flip side, I would say the only backlash that I've gotten content-wise is actually from, again, my father. And he's my, well, other than me, he's my biggest critic, which I appreciate because he
Right.
keeps me grounded. Um, and that was that it wasn't even that the content was bad, but it was that there were still a couple of holdover cliches from when I, because the first version of Deception was written when I was 17 years old,
Hmm.
and, or no, I was 18 at the time. And and so he goes, I'm reading this, and I could still see where there are traces of 18-year-old didn't really know what he was talking about other than a quick Google search and a Wikipedia, and he'd seen Black Hawk Down a couple times, Zach.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I can accept that. So I've been extremely fortunate that I haven't really had any backlash
It's
yet.
good. Yes, you don't want that.
Yeah, I'm gonna, because it's inevitable, especially once you get into this market and you start putting more and more out there, and now I've got two genres full of audiences that everyone's got an opinion,
Right.
and mine doesn't matter because once you put it out there, it's whatever they interpret and how they want to feel about it, which that's just the nature of the beast.
Hmm.
So, hopefully that when the time comes, at least it can be a well thought out argument that I can walk away from and be like, oh, maybe I can take that into consideration for the future, and not just, oh,
Yeah.
that guy was just yelling because he had a bad day at work and didn't like my
Right.
book, and he's taking it out on me because he knows he's not going to get punched in the face over the
Right.
internet.
Right. And you're not going to get into an altercation over your Amazon review. You're safe there
Yeah.
to vent about your day. And the second one he wanted me to ask was, are there any video games or movies that helped inspire or shape the Modern Mercenary series?
Oh my gosh, how much time you got? So the Modern Mercenary series, video games, Call of Duty was a huge one, especially Modern Warfare 2019 because that came
Right.
out and I was like, oh, like this is kind of getting dark. Like I can work with this, and that sort of let me shift the tone a little darker, and
Yeah.
you know definitely more so as the series has gone on. Um, what else, video game and movie wise? Well, I will say I completely reworked the opening of Deception after seeing Triple Frontier, with the
Ooh.
helicopter insertion portion,
Yeah.
along with the land insertion, because originally it was all land. But then I saw the opening of Triple Frontier. I was like, I need a helicopter in South America. This is
Yeah.
this
So
is too
good.
cool. Um, what else? The Equalizer, the first one. The I should really write these down so in case I get this
Yeah.
question again. Then again, though, I'll be like number 86. They'll be like, it's been an hour. Move on. Um, Black Hawk Down was a big one. Blood Diamond for the second one. Actually, so a pretty pivotal non-action scene in All In, book number three of the Modern Mercenary series, was actually influenced um, by the first season of The Punisher,
Ooh, yes.
and a very good non-action scene in that. Um, 5 points to whoever. The points mean nothing. They're like tokens from Chuck E. Cheese, but 5 points to anyone who after this is able to go back and find the scene I'm talking about in both book and series. Um, what else? Blood Diamond. I think I already said that one. I'm just gonna call it at that because we'll
Yeah,
be here for 45 minutes just while I
that's
think.
a good one.
If
Those are good. Those are good.
if I try to answer that with all of them, so we'll leave those at now. But I'll get with Jake offline and we'll
Yes.
discuss that more too.
And we'll have to get Jake on. We'll all three of us just talk movie and video game inspirations. That
Oh
we
my
can have a
gosh,
whole
yeah,
conversation.
that would be amazing.
And then I guess final two questions I have for you are piece of writing advice for aspiring writers, and then some book recommendations for readers.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give two for the writing advice. The first is everyone's heard it 1,000 times. They're going to hear it 1,000 times more as they get into this. Just do it. Just write. Because, you know, every day that you're writing, you're improving on your craft. And actually, I'm going to amend that and say I'm going to give three. Write a lot, write every day, read. Read every day because the more you read and the more genres and writers that you read, the better your understanding and grasp on the English language will be. And also, it'll just increase your vocabulary exponentially, just like that.
Well, there you
So,
go.
and then my personal piece of writing advice is for those who, because a question that I've gotten a lot is how I'm able to grab those tiny little details that really suck people into a scene. And the way I'm able to do that is I'm playing the movie of it in my head. And that's what I'm pulling from to put on the paper. And a lot of people are like, well, how are you able to do that? And there's a lot of practice that goes into it. So what I will say for people who want to do that is pick your favorite movie, series, video game, scene from any of those, and then do this exercise. Write out basically that scene as if you're doing the novelization. Write it out how you would do the dialogue, the descriptions. What little details are you pulling from that screen to put on the paper that's then putting the reader into the scene? Is it raining? What are the smells? What's the temperature? What's the ambient noise like? Because those are all little things that we don't really think about in our day to day.
Mhm.
But when you're watching a movie or reading a book and those things are mentioned, and especially for me because I've just got such an overactive imagination that I'm already transported to another world even before I've started reading most of the time. Those bring it all together. And so if you practice that with external sources being the movie, the series, the video game, whatever, you'll eventually do enough mental reps for that you'll be able to do it in your own head with your own story. And then once you're playing that movie up here, you're golden.
There you go. That's awesome. That is fantastic. I've never even heard that one before. So that's a new one. People will take out some gold from this one. And that makes me even more excited. We have to do that conversation now with you, me, and Jake about movies and video game inspirations. That'd be a great conversation.
That'll be like a 3 hour episode and we still won't cover
Yes,
everything.
yes. And then is there another piece of advice you wanted to give, or is that should we ask
That that
what's
that
next
that
for?
that
All right,
that was the main three
sweet.
that I could think of right off the top of my head.
Yes, and then book recommendations.
Yeah. Also, before we do that, I just got
Hmm?
another message saying someone going, Roland is like the best character. So
There you go. He is. He's so good. The scene where he's like working on something and sweating and not like being affected by the sweat, I found that hilarious. Like I was like, that's when I decided he's my favorite character. This guy's fantastic.
yeah, that was a lot of because that wasn't in a lot of the original drafts, and I was like, let me just get into it of like, yeah, he looks human and does all this stuff, but it's only for appearance,
Right.
you
It's just
know?
to make you more comfortable.
Yeah. And then, so what was the final question?
Book recommendations for some readers out there. What are some good things to read these days?
All right, good things to read these days. Like this is going to be like the movie thing. How much time
Yeah.
we got? So I am going to just kind of jump all over the place with what comes to mind. So anyone who wants to read thrillers, the two golden examples for thrillers that I'm going to give are Rainbow Six and Without Remorse by Tom Clancy, because they are master classes in multi character storytelling, especially in Without Remorse, where he's got five separate storylines that are all weaving together and seemingly independent until they're not. And it's done in a way where even when I go back and re-listen to it, I'm like, damn, that's amazing how we brought it back together. and Rainbow Six just because it's one of the coolest stories I've ever read, and it's the book that got me into writing. I read that at 12 years old and was like, I want to write something like this eventually. On the science fiction side of the house, other than Occupant, shameless plug,
Hmm.
I'm going to recommend at least the first book in the Expanse series, which is Leviathan Wakes. And the only reason I'm only recommending the first book right now is because that's the only one that I've read slash listened to. But it's fantastic, and it very much I listened to that while I was taking a break from working on Occupant's sequel, not sequel, um, to announce that, and it influenced a couple scenes in that. And also, I've heard the show is really faithful to the book. On the more adventure, less hard science fiction thing, I'm going to give the recommendation of the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. That is a phenomenal series. He just released book 6 last month, or 2 months ago now. It's September. Pierce is a great guy. I don't know him personally, but I did get to meet him, and he just seemed like a lovely human being. I will say for that series, the first book, which I still enjoy very much, but it is very much a Hunger Games ish style
Hmm.
book.
Okay.
Stick with the series though, because once he gets into book 2 and really introduces you to the greater world and the universe, it's it's a wild ride, and there are some really cool concepts in that. Other book recommendations, I'm going to give a shout out to a recent friend of mine, Derek Pacifico, and his book Greed. We actually work together now, and someone was like, "Oh, you're a writer. You should talk to him. He's a
That's
writer
awesome.
too." And that his is actually a crime novel. Follows a guy newly appointed San Bernardino Sheriff Homicide Unit. Really well written, really punchy, and it carries that same weight of because he did this for 20 some years before he got into the job that he's doing now. He's writing from a place that he knows, and man, it's just a great read. And it's
I
also
love
very
that.
funny because I told him this. I read the dialogue, and I'm like, I'm reading it. It's you speaking, like
That's
because
fantastic.
you write exactly how you speak, which I've been told I also do. Um, I'm gonna cheat, and I'm actually just gonna look at my look at my bookshelf real quick. Oh, another sci-fi recommendation is Charles Hack and
Okay.
his two books.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, what is the first one? Into the Darkness, I think, and then the second one, which is Shrouded in Darkness, and he's also got a couple of PDFs like novella short stories and his own horror one. Charles is a great dude. Connected with him last year. Great. His is cool because it's very much a Star Wars meets Tom Clancy, and that it's sci-fi, but also has that political thriller aspect to it.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
So
I like that.
I want to give my buddy Sam Wright. He writes more of like a he writes more of like almost like an urban fantasy espionage series. He just released his second book this year. Those so the first one is called Unyielding. The second one is called Rebellion. Highly recommend those. And then finally, because like I said, I'll be here for forever and a day if I am if I'm listing off everything. Actually, I'm going to recommend two more. The other one I'm going to recommend is Ama Adair, her series, the L. Anderson series, which is starts with I think Shadow Game. Yeah, she's got 3 books out now. She's awesome. Very similar background to me, but she worked with a lot cooler people than I did. Um, and her experience with all that really translates over into her writing. Goodness gracious! On the nonfiction side, I want to recommend because it's very on brand for me, "The Modern Mercenary" by Sean McFate. Admittedly, I haven't read all of it yet. I've read bits and pieces of it, but it's a nonfiction account of basically private armies in the 21st century and how they're used in ways that regular governments and militaries can't operate. And you
It's
know,
interesting.
funny enough, yeah. I like I said, I haven't actually read it all the way through yet, and I hadn't read it at all at the time of writing Deception and all that.
Yeah.
But apparently, the author is Sean McFate. I think he's Dr. Sean McFate. I don't remember correctly. Um, but I believe that he's actually in like the DC area, so I got to try and meet up with him one day. And then my final recommendation. is two debut novels, although I don't have the first debut novel, and that would be by these guys. I want to recommend. I don't have a physical copy of Frozen Wrath yet, but I want to recommend Frozen Wrath and Retaliation by you, and Homecoming by Jake Widmer. You guys knocked it out of the park with
Thank
your
you.
debut novels.
I appreciate
I
that.
really enjoyed them. You know, they were very quick but very punchy reads, and you guys are off to a great start. So those are the
I
final
appreciate that.
recommendations I want to make for this very long, drawn out, and just hot air list that I've been throwing out because I don't have anything prepared and should probably start making lists about these questions.
No, thank you. That's great. And I'm gonna go back and put all these on my list because that's why I asked this question is to grow by TBR to more books that I can never read. So, it's good. I like to hear as many recommendations as humanly possible. And I still haven't read um either of those Tom Clancy books. Like I haven't read Rainbow Six or Without Remorse. I need to. I know.
Oh,
Um,
dude, they're so
I
good.
need
You're in for a wild ride for
Yeah.
both of them. They're so good.
I'm
And the
excited.
good thing is you can kind of read them in whichever order you want.
Okay.
Technically, Without Remorse comes first.
Mhm.
Well, not technically, it does come first. But if you read Rainbow Six first, then Without Remorse is a prequel that sheds light on a certain character and background. And you're like, oh. Or if
Yeah.
you read it in the other way, it's like, okay, I get this character. Oh, now I see how he's grown. So
Okay.
it
I've
works both ways.
I have one additional question then, since you said that is like one of your favorite thrillers. Is his name John Clark, the character? Is that
Yes,
his
it
name?
is.
Okay. So who is your favorite like on-screen John Clark so far? Who do you think did it best?
Willem Dafoe,
Okay. That's what I thought you were
bar
gonna say.
none. Yeah, Willem Dafoe is fantastic. Lee Schreiber was okay.
Uh-huh.
Um, Michael B. Jordan could have been great had that film actually been anything related to Without Remorse other than having the title. It
Yeah.
was it had nothing to do with it, and they did him a disservice by not giving him the opportunity to play that character properly.
That sucks.
Um, and it really irritates me. And it's what irritates me even more is I know that eventually they're going because in the after credit scene, even though I didn't
Yeah.
watch the movie, but I did look that up. They talk about Rainbow, which means they're probably going to do Rainbow Six, which is going to be a bastardized version of it, and I will refuse to see it. So,
Yeah. It's always the worst when
and
you become a huge fan and then you have to see it kind of taken apart on the screen.
yeah, but you know what? I mean, hey, I'm trying to teach myself screenwriting, and maybe I can write the actual one for
That would be
later on
sweet.
when they're like, "Oh yeah, that was terrible. Let's give this guy a shot."
Right. That would be perfect. Well, dude, thank you so much for your time and being super patient with these technical difficulties because they won't know what happened because it'll be all edited out. But man, this was a triumph for us to get this thing
uh,
done.
we
So thank you.
we persevered. That's all
We
that
did.
matters.
We did. We made it through. So yes, thank you very much. And for anybody who hasn't
No,
read it
thank you
yet,
for having me on, man. I've I've enjoyed all your interviews so far, and I enjoy your content. So I'm
thank you.
happy to be here.
Thank you. Now, people go pick out Occupant right now. Like, go pick it up. Give us a read, especially Halloween season's coming up. It's time. It's time. All right. Thank you. Take care. Have a great night. I appreciate you.
You as well. Thanks, brother.